Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. My guest today is Nick Hamilton Honey, the natural resource and sustainable energy educator from Cornell Cooperative Extension of St. Lawrence County. We're going to be discussing the latest news on spreading disease risks from various species to humans. Our topic today, Nick, is one that's really important, and we all need to learn a lot more about what you have to say to stay healthy, don't we?
We do, we do. Thank you, Donna, for having me on.
Well, thank you for your efforts to educate the community about these risks. So, this year has been fraught with many stories in the news about the risks of diseases from ticks, mosquitoes, and birds. We've heard about everything from the dangers of tick bites, a whole host of mosquito-borne diseases that are making their way into New York State, and to the prevalence of bird flu and its impact on our health and our food prices. Tick-borne diseases in particular have been in the news a lot. A few years ago, the only tick-borne disease we ever heard about was Lyme disease, and that was pretty rare. Now there are a whole host of ticks that carry in nasty diseases that affect us, our pets, and our farm animals. What are some of the ticks to watch out for, Nick?
Yeah, so the kind of one that we need to really pay attention to the most to is blacklegged ticks. And we might hear this as deer tick, but that's a misnomer. Um, the black-legged tick is actually just using the deer tick as a blood meal. It's not where most of those diseases are coming from. We have the American dog tick, which is a little bit more prevalent than the brown dog tick. So those are two, other ticks besides the black-legged tick here in St. Lawrence County and the North Country. And then there's the Lone Star tick, and the Lone Star tick is downstate, but if we're traveling in New York State, this is one of the ticks that we need to be thinking about when we're traveling within New York State. And the ticks have hooks on the ends of their legs that act almost like Velcro, and that's what they're using to grab a hold of us. And this thing that they do is called questing. So they quest with these hooks to get that blood meal. Okay? And most ticks don't travel that far. The Lone Star tick actually does. Like it will go to find that blood meal, unlike those black-legged ticks or the American dog tick or the brown dog tick.
So this summer, our dog, who has regular flea and tick medication, was infected with anaplasmosis and required a 3-week regime of very strong antibiotics in order to be cured. In talking with our vet and other vet providers, we learned that this disease has been nearly epidemic in our area among pets. And of course, it can also infect humans as well, but we don't get regular flea and tick medication, do we?
We do not. We do not. And yes, Lyme is the one we think of most often when we're thinking about these tick-borne diseases. But anaplasmosis has been on the increase in human population. And there are other, diseases, common illnesses that we can potentially get from ticks. And those are ehrlichiosis, babiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and Powassan virus. And these tick-borne illnesses can have similar signs and symptoms. So, common is fever or chills, headache, fatigue, muscle aches, joint pain, and rashes. And, we think of that typical bullseye rash for Lyme disease. That's not actually so typical, but that is specific to Lyme disease. Other of the diseases also have rashes, and all of these can kind of mimic flu or cold, which we're going into that season. So we just have to be aware. And if you believe you've been exposed to a tick, going to a doctor to make sure that you get that treatment like your dog did of the antibiotics.
And in fact, it was a routine examination, blood work examination, which we had done with our dog. She was actually at the vet for something else when they detected it. There were no visible signs that she was sick. And so one of the things that some of the vet techs expressed to us was how important it is that you make sure your pet has a provider on a regular basis, because if they get sick or get exposed, it may not be possible to get into a vet as a new patient. So having those regular checks is really important because it may show up before symptoms do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what can people do to reduce their exposure to tick bites? Because that really is the best way to handle that. Don't get sick in the first place.
Absolutely. So the first thing that you really want to be paying attention to is, where am I going that I might be finding ticks? And ticks can be in your yard or your garden. It really just depends upon what animals are traveling through, or potentially traveling through. So ticks like shady, moist areas, generally at ground level, but this could be like tall grass, it could be shrubs. They also like edges of woody areas, so going from woods to, say a trail, right? So you want to pay attention when you're in those areas and know that you're in an area where you're probably going to find ticks. And if you have you're in an area that has a nice wide path, walk in the middle. So that was one. Two is that you want to dress for prevention. So this has kind of like a two-part. You want to make sure that you're wearing long pants, long sleeves, socks and closed-toe shoes. You want to tuck your pants into your socks. You want to tuck your shirt into your pants. And that's just so ticks they have a harder time getting to those areas where they can take those blood meals. And what light colored so that you can see ticks on the clothing. And then you also want to treat your clothes. So there's a couple of products that you can use to treat your clothing when you know you're going out into an area where you would expect ticks. And this might be for gardeners too, that you have a set of clothing that you treat to garden. And you're treating the clothing or your gear with permethrin or picaridin. So you want to always make sure that you're reading the labels and properly using any type of insect repellent. But these treatments actually allow you to wear a set of clothing and wash them a certain amount of times before you actually have to treat them again. And again, that's on that label. So that was two. Three, you want to personally treat yourself. So you want to use insect repellent, again, following all label instructions. You want a repellent that's 20 DEET and at least 20%. Or you can use picaridin. So again, that picaridin we use to treat our clothes, we can also use that on our skin. Not so for the permethrin, that is for your clothing only. So the picaridin, we want it to be about anywhere from 10 to 20% to make sure it's really effective. And then we can also use IR 3535, which is a DEET-free alternative. But as far as ticks go, it's just slightly less effective than DEET would be. So just keep that in mind. Again, following all label instructions and reapplying as needed. Side note here, if you are using insect repellent and sunscreen at the same time, you need to make sure that you're reapplying the sunscreen more often, because that DEET, that insect repellent, makes the sunscreen less effective. And then finally, in that fourth thing is that you want to do tick checks. You want to check when you are coming back in from an area where you know ticks are, and you want to check a day later as well.
Yes, I actually was plucked a tick off my husband this summer. He was outside wearing multiple layers of clothes, and somehow it still got inside on him. And I have to say that this summer I've seen I've seen ticks for the first time. Although I knew they were out there, they were for some reason much more active this summer wherever we've been. So let's move on to mosquitoes, Nick. Although it was an unusually dry summer, there were still plenty of them around. Give us some background on the mosquito insects here in New York State and why we need to be careful about the diseases they carry and spread.
Yeah, so it just as a, knowledge, there are 3,600 species of mosquito, only 70 of which are in New York State, and only two of which we really need to be concerned about. The first one is the northern house mosquito, and that feeds dusk, night, and dawn. And that's important so that we know which type of mosquito that we need to be watching out for. The other type of mosquito is the Asian tiger mosquito, and that feeds during the day. Both of those species are using water to breed in. So we really need to be aware of where water is when we're out and about. The northern house mosquito transmits West Nile virus and dog heartworm. The Asian tiger mosquito transmits Eastern equine encephalitis or triple E, Zika, and dog heartworm. This year in Franklin County in September, there was someone that tested positive for West Nile virus. And Clarkson University, both faculty and students, have been part of this statewide effort to do mosquito surveillance. And this really allows us to understand when we might be seeing some of these mosquito-borne diseases in humans. And last year there were 6 horses that had triple E, and all of those horses died. And there's other very exotic, not really common to the US, and especially not common to New York State, you know, viruses and bacteria that we need to worry about.
And you make a great point about doing the mosquito surveillance because our healthcare providers aren't used to seeing these exotic and what are often tropical type diseases. And so if they are out there in the environment, it helps our providers know if someone comes in with an unusual set of symptoms that they should be checking for this, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Yeah, this is really the key way that providers can help, with our human health.
So, Nick, what can we do to protect ourselves and our animals from mosquitoes? Because they're everywhere.
They are everywhere. It is true. So same as we had with the ticks, the mosquitoes, we can use those insect repellents. So we can use that DEET, remember 20%. We can use that Percardin, 10 to 20%. We can use that IR 3535. And in this case, it's very effective for mosquitoes. And there's also the plant-based oil of lemon eucalyptus if you're not, so keen on using more DEET. We can wear protective clothing. So kind of unlike the tick, you want a little bit more loose fitting clothing. So, you still want long sleeves, you still want long pants, socks, and closed-toed shoes. But the loose clothing doesn't allow the mosquito to, get its proboscis through your clothing to take that blood meal. You need to control your environment. So eliminating standing water, if it happens to be a flower pot, gutters, bird baths, any of those things, we want to make sure that we're not allowing mosquitoes to breed in them. So the bird bath you want to change out every day, and that's the easiest way to eliminate that. But if you have other kind of like water features, you can use the mosquito dunks or any sort of BTI product, and that's really targeting the mosquito larvae, not other insects, so not pollinators, etc. But mosquitoes can breed in a cap full of water, so you have to be really, really paying attention, not allow that standing water to stay there. And then really important, and something that folks don't often think about, is making sure that our windows and doors have screens, and that the screens don't have any sort of gap. So even, in between a couple of those little squares on your screen, if they're open, a mosquito can get in. So you really want to look at uh, the full, top to bottom, your screens, and your doors and windows. And if you're going to be outside and there's high mosquito activity, use a mosquito net, whether this is, just over your head, or if you happen to be sleeping outdoors, you want a full net so that you're protecting yourself. And then to protect our dogs from that dog heartworm, we want to make sure that they're getting preventative medication to prevent dog heartworm. And then our horse friends, right? We don't want to see them getting Tripolies, so there's a vaccination for Tripoli, getting that vaccination for our horses. We also, when we're out and about, if we see dead birds, we want to let public health know. And that is because corvids, especially crows, ravens, jays of any kind, they are very susceptible to West Nile virus. So if you see dead birds, could be that it's a dead bird because of West Nile virus. But it also could be something we're talking about next.
Right, right. There's so much to be aware of. There's so much to be thinking about when it comes to this sort of stuff. So what we're going to be talking about next, as you mentioned, was bird flu, or highly pathogenic avian influenza, as is more properly called. In the last few years, it has been rampant in wild bird populations and has spread to poultry farms and sometimes to backyard flocks. We've seen an impact on egg prices and poultry meat prices as a result. So we're in fall bird migration season right now. What do we need to know, and what do we need to be thinking about, Nick?
Yeah, so if we're really thinking about our backyard flocks, we want to make sure that we're protecting those backyard flocks from getting exposed to wild birds, especially waterfowl. So, you making sure we have fencing up, or potentially netting, just depending upon how close you are to waterfowl or a very large wild bird population. If you have a backyard flock, you don't really want to be feeding wild birds. So you shouldn't have backyard feeders if you have wild birds, because you're just bringing that potential bird flu to your backyard flock. And then we want to do some simple biosecurity measures. This doesn't have to be very complicated. Can just be wearing gloves, wearing a mask, making sure that if we have, boots that we wear specifically when taking care of our chickens or ducks, or geese in our backyard flocks, that we are able to, bring those in, disinfect those before we use them again. And especially if you have friends or neighbors that also have backyard flocks that you go and visit, you want to make sure that you're doing this disinfecting, because then even if potentially your backyard flock gets exposed to bird flu, you're not passing that on to a friend or neighbor's backyard flock. Disinfecting boots, but you also then change your clothing as well if you're going to go visit a friend or neighbor with a backyard flock. And then for those of us who don't have backyard flocks, but we do really love seeing the songbirds in our backyard, and we feed wild bird populations, this is all a comfort level for you. If you have cats, you may wish to not feed the wild bird population just because cats are really impacted by the bird flu. And if you do really love seeing the birds and you do have cats, just making sure you take precautions. Having those shoes or boots that are separate from where your cats are. So you keep them in another area of the house, you keep them in the garage, whatever. They're away from the cats. Making sure that when you're going out to feed your wild birds, you're wearing gloves. You're coming in, you're making sure you're washing your hands really well so that your cats will not be exposed potentially to the bird flu. Um, and and this is just good hygiene for your birds in general. Is that you should be bringing in your feeders every few weeks and cleaning them with a 10% bleach solution, making sure you're rinsing them really well, making sure they're dry before they go back out. And that should be anytime you have feeders up. So if you're feeding potentially, in summer, you should be doing that then too, just to make sure you're keeping any of that bird flu reservoir out of your bird feeders. And transmission from wild birds to humans isn't very common. We see it more going from dairy to humans. But we want to make sure that we're keeping our backyard flocks, if you have them, the wild bird population, your cats or you healthy, right? And we also don't want to feed our cats raw milk or beef for the fact that they could be getting this bird flu from those items, from raw milk or beef.
There is a lot to be thinking about. This isn't the old days when you just went out and dumped some sunflower seeds in the backyard feeder. It's really got a lot to think about and a lot of precautions to take in order to keep everybody safe. So thank you for that. So, Nick, does the advent of cold weather and freezing temperatures help with any of these threats?
I wish that I could say a very emphatic yes, it does. But we need to be thinking about these things year round, not only for our health, but for our animals' health. So ticks can be active year around, right? Anytime it's above 40 degrees-ish, even if there's snow on the ground. So I think of February now, where we get this thaw. There still might be snow on the ground, but it's really quite warm. The potential is that ticks will be out and about. And during the fall is when blacklegged ticks, adult blacklegged ticks, are most active. So we really, really need to be paying attention to ticks anytime it's warm. Mosquitoes, sort of the same, a little bit higher threshold as far as temperature. We get to about 50 degrees and the mosquitoes are just less active. So the likelihood is less then. Doesn't mean it's zero, but the likelihood is less. And once we have consistent freezing, then we'll see a kill off of those adult mosquitoes. But that doesn't mean that once we get those warm days in February, we won't see mosquitoes again, because then we might see adults that weren't killed, or if it's warm enough for, a period of time, those larvae that have overwintered could molt into adults. And, we could see them then on those warmer winter days. And then bird flu, most prevalent during spring and fall migrations, but is also present in winter and is present in much lower numbers, but can be present in the summer as well.
So really what you're talking about is, for example, now we see maple sugar season in February, and that's really the time to start thinking about ticks and mosquitoes again, isn't it? For sure.
It really is. It really is.
So you've done a lot of work with community education as part of your Cornell work. And what other resources do you have that can help folks to understand what the dangers are, what to be watching out for, and how to protect themselves? And I know you're going to give me some websites, and I'll be sure to add those to our show notes for folks. But there's a lot of places to go for help, isn't there?
There really is. The first stop you can go to is, of course, our website, which is stlawrence.cce.cornell.edu. And under the Natural Resources tab, there's a whole host of information about ticks and mosquitoes. If we're thinking about prevention, the EPA has a website for different insect repellents, so you can get more information about different types of repellents. The CDC has wonderful websites for ticks and mosquitoes. And the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, also has a website that's really great for bird flu resources. And you will be able to see those in the show notes and click on those and check out those resources.
And you also mentioned, I think that there's the IPM, New York State IPM.
Oh,
What
the New
site is
York
that?
State. That's the integrated pest management website run through Cornell, but lots of great information, not only about ticks, mosquitoes, but other pests that you might have around your house. So definitely check out the New York State IPM.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a real education. There is so much more to think about than there used to be. All these kinds of things, not only for ourselves, but for our pets and for our animals, that we need to really be much more cautious and be much more forward thinking about prevention than maybe some of us were used to growing up in New York State. So thank you
It's
so much.
true.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick, for today and for all the work that you're doing and the other programs that you put on, because every person we reach is one less person who may end up being sick or having to care for a sick animal. And that's really important to ourselves and to our community.
Absolutely. It really is. Thank you, Donna.
Well, and we may not have a backyard water feature in our yard, but our neighbors might. So it's thinking more broadly is important about these issues, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
Well, thanks again for coming in and for doing the show. And I hope that people have learned some important prevention methods from you, because that's really what this is all about. So thanks again. So these conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.